Ilara adjusted her apron nervously as she stepped into the grand hall of the royal estate. The ceiling was high, carved with intricate patterns of dragons and flowers, and golden chandeliers hung like frozen stars, reflecting candlelight that danced across the polished marble floor. Every step she took echoed in the empty space, reminding her that even the smallest mistake here could draw attention. She had been working as a servant in the palace for a few months now, quietly going about her duties, serving food and drink to nobles who often barely noticed her existence. Ilara was small, timid, and unassuming, traits that had kept her unnoticed, safe in a place where attention could be dangerous. Yet beneath her quiet demeanor, she carried a secret skill. She understood the ancient language of gestures. Signs and motions could convey thoughts far deeper than spoken words, and few people in the kingdom still remembered the old ways. Tonight, she carried a tray of glasses filled with a sparkling amber liquid, stepping lightly between the polished legs of the guests. Courtiers whispered to one another, their eyes glinting with curiosity and suspicion. The Queen Mother, Seraphine, sat at the head of the hall, her posture straight and regal despite her frailty. Her hair was silver white, and her eyes, sharp and piercing, seemed to look through time itself. Seraphine was deaf, but her presence carried a quiet authority that silenced everyone around her. Ilara's heart beat faster as she approached the Queen Mother. She had seen Seraphine before, of course, but only from afar. Tonight her hands trembled slightly as she balanced the tray, aware that the slightest stumble could be noticed. The Queen Mother's eyes followed her, intense and unwavering. Then something unexpected happened. As Ilara steadied herself, she instinctively raised a hand in a small, polite wave. It was a simple gesture, one meant to apologize for her nervousness, but Seraphine's face lit with recognition. A tiny smile appeared, and for a moment the rest of the room seemed to fade away. The courtiers noticed it too. Whispers began to ripple through the hall. "Did you see that?" "The Queen Mother." She acknowledged her. No servant has ever drawn her attention like that. Ilara froze, unsure what to do next. The Queen Mother lifted her hand slowly, signing a single word with grace and precision. Ilara's stomach tightened. She did not recognize the word, but it felt ancient and full of meaning. It was a summons. The courtiers watched, confused and uneasy, as Seraphine's gaze never left Ilara. She made no sound, yet her fingers moved with authority and mystery. Ilara's pulse quickened. She was being called to the Queen Mother's private chamber alone. The room behind the Queen Mother, usually closed to all, now seemed to beckon her forward. Ilara's legs felt weak, but a strange determination pushed her onward. She left the hall, bowing quickly, her tray carefully emptied, and followed the long corridor lined with portraits of previous rulers. Their painted eyes seemed to watch her, some disapproving, some curious. It felt as though the past itself had been waiting for this moment, watching, judging, and anticipating. When she arrived at the heavy carved door of the private chamber, she hesitated. A chill ran down her spine. The chamber was larger than she had imagined, with tall windows covered in thick velvet drapes that blocked most of the moonlight. In the center, a low table was surrounded by cushions, and candles flickered in iron sconces along the walls. Seraphine sat waiting, her posture as straight and commanding as in the hall, but her eyes softened as they met Ilara's. The Queen Mother's fingers moved again, slower this time, more deliberate. She spoke in the language of signs, a rhythm that was both foreign and familiar, like an old song remembered in a dream. Ilara listened carefully, her mind straining to follow the fluid motions. She answered with her own hands, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. Each gesture carried meaning, each movement a tiny bridge between them. The silence of words was filled with unspoken thoughts, emotions, and understanding. Seraphine revealed that the royal court had been cursed. Whispers, mistrust, and fear had poisoned the hearts of nobles. Anyone who could not communicate with her through gestures would be trapped in despair, slowly losing hope, sometimes even their sanity. Only someone who could truly understand her, not just her words but her emotions and intentions, could lift the silent shadow over the kingdom. Ilara listened, awestruck. She had never imagined that her quiet skill, once a secret hobby, could hold such power. She realized that her timid nature, her habit of observing and learning quietly, was exactly what the Queen Mother needed. She could see the truth in others, feel the subtle currents of emotion, and respond with honesty. As the night wore on, a strange connection grew between them. Seraphine's gestures were fluid, elegant, and almost hypnotic. Ilara felt her heart beat faster with each motion, a mixture of fear, admiration, and something she did not yet understand. It was a dangerous closeness, the kind that could bring power or peril, love or despair. Suddenly, a soft sound echoed from outside the chamber. Ilara froze. Footsteps. Someone was moving in the corridor, perhaps a servant or a spy. Seraphine's eyes flicked toward the door, sharp and alert, yet she made no sound. She signed quickly, instructing Ilara to remain calm and silent. Ilara nodded, her hands moving as she had learned, carefully and deliberately. The footsteps paused at the door, and for a long, tense moment she thought they might be discovered. But then the sound faded, leaving only the whisper of the candle flames. When the tension eased, Seraphine's hands moved again, slower this time, shaping a word that Ilara recognized immediately. It was an invitation. Trust. Ilara's chest tightened. Trust was not easy for her, never had been. She had always hidden in the background, afraid of attention, afraid of failure. Yet here, in the presence of the Queen Mother, she felt a spark of courage she had never known. For the first time, someone powerful had not dismissed her for her size, her shyness, or her silence. Someone believed in her. Before Ilara could respond, the Queen Mother's fingers moved once more, signing a warning that made her blood run cold. Outside the chamber, shadows lurked, waiting for the right moment to strike. Courtiers jealous of this unusual bond would not tolerate it. Danger was coming, not just to Ilara, but to anyone who dared challenge the court's cruel power. Ilara's hands trembled as she signed back, her movements confident yet delicate. "I will try." Seraphine nodded, a faint, approving smile on her lips. She gestured for Ilara to come closer, and as she did, the Queen Mother's eyes glimmered with a mix of admiration, longing, and something older, deeper, almost like a secret the world had forgotten. The night outside the chamber was quiet, but inside an invisible storm of emotions swirled. Fear, longing, curiosity, and the weight of destiny pressed down on Ilara's shoulders. She realized that nothing would ever be the same again. And then, as she prepared to leave the chamber, the Queen Mother signed one final word, a word that froze Ilara's blood and lit a fire in her heart. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, she would begin a journey that would change her life forever. A journey of trust, courage, and perhaps even love. And she knew deep down that the shadows watching from the corners of the palace would not rest until they tested her resolve and the bond she had just begun to form with the Queen Mother. Ilara took a deep breath, bowed low, and left the chamber. The corridor seemed darker now, the portrait's eyes following her even more closely, but a spark of determination glowed inside her chest. She was no longer just a timid servant. She was someone who could touch truth, someone who could reach hearts through silence. And as she disappeared into the shadows of the palace, the candlelight flickered on the walls like tiny stars, whispering promises of trials, power, and a bond that could either save the kingdom or destroy it. The next morning, the palace seemed colder, quieter, and heavier than usual. Ilara moved through the corridors with measured steps, her hands clutching the tray of morning tea, yet her mind was elsewhere. Every shadow, every flicker of candlelight seemed to whisper of the Queen Mother's summons from the night before. Her timid heart beat faster as she approached the chamber door. She knew today she would begin something dangerous, mysterious, and extraordinary. Seraphine had instructed her to come alone, a test of trust and courage. The heavy door opened silently, revealing the chamber, bathed in the soft glow of morning sunlight filtering through velvet drapes. The low table and cushions remained as they had been, but the atmosphere was charged, as though the walls themselves were alive and aware of her presence. Seraphine sat on a cushion, poised and graceful. Her silver hair shimmered faintly in the light, and her eyes, sharp yet gentle, held a question that made Ilara's stomach twist. Today she would learn more than signs. She would learn secrets that had been buried in the palace for decades. The Queen Mother's hands moved with fluid precision, signing words that were part instruction, part mystery. Ilara followed carefully, mirroring each gesture. It was not simply communication, it was a test of connection. She had to feel Seraphine's intentions, her unspoken thoughts, her hidden fears. The task was daunting, and Ilara's hands shook at first. "Focus on her eyes," Seraphine signed silently. "They tell more than words ever could." Ilara looked into Seraphine's deep gray eyes and suddenly understood the weight of her presence. The Queen Mother had lived through decades of betrayal, fear, and loss, and yet there was a softness beneath the hardness of her life. In that gaze, Ilara felt both caution and longing, a mixture that pulled at her timid heart. As their hands moved together in a silent dance of signs, the Queen Mother revealed the truth of the court's curse. Long ago, a rival queen, jealous of Seraphine's family, had cast a subtle enchantment over the palace. Anyone who failed to understand the Queen Mother's gestures would slowly lose hope, trapped in shadows of doubt and despair. Those who tried to deceive or manipulate her through words alone fell into madness. Ilara listened, fascinated and frightened. She realized her gift, her quiet observation, her skill with signs was rare and precious. Only someone like her, honest, attentive, and gentle, could hope to lift the curse and restore balance to the court. The Queen Mother's hands moved toward Ilara, closer than before, and the air between them thickened. Each gesture was filled with emotion, fear, hope, sorrow, and something else, something Ilara did not yet understand, but it made her heart race. "You have the gift," Seraphine signed softly, almost like a whisper, "but courage will be your test. Trust is your path. Fear will always try to follow you." Ilara nodded, swallowing hard. The words, though silent, struck her deeply. She had always hidden in the background, afraid of attention, afraid of making mistakes. Yet here she felt a spark of something stronger. Responsibility, courage, and a strange, thrilling connection to the Queen Mother. For hours they practiced together. Seraphine taught Ilara gestures that conveyed entire sentences, not just words. She showed her how a slight tilt of the head could indicate a question, how a subtle motion of the fingers could communicate urgency, warning, or even affection. The lessons were exhausting, but Ilara's confidence grew with each successful gesture. By mid-afternoon, a bond had begun to form. It was more than teacher and student. It was trust and understanding, a silent closeness that neither fully named but both felt. Ilara found herself glancing at Seraphine's hands, the way they moved like poetry in the air, and feeling an inexplicable warmth. Seraphine, in turn, watched Ilara's small, careful movements with approval, a faint smile softening her usually stern expression. But the palace outside was not so peaceful. Whispers of jealousy and suspicion had already begun to circulate among the nobles. Some believed Ilara was manipulating the Queen Mother. Others thought she had discovered secrets she should never know. Shadows moved in the corridors, curious eyes peering from behind doors and curtains. Danger was near, silent but inevitable. During a brief pause, Seraphine gestured toward a set of ancient portraits lining one wall. Each portrait depicted a past ruler of the kingdom, and Ilara noticed that their eyes seemed almost alive, almost judging her. "These walls remember," Seraphine signed. "They know truth from falsehood. Be careful, for not all who watch you wish you well." Ilara's stomach tightened. She had felt this before, the eyes of the past, the weight of history pressing down on her. But she felt braver now, strengthened by Seraphine's guidance. She would not falter. Just as she was about to reply, a soft rustle came from the corner of the chamber. Ilara froze. A shadow moved near the drapes, and for a heartbeat, she feared a spy or a jealous noble had followed her. But it was only a small bird that had somehow found its way inside, fluttering nervously before flying to the window. The interruption broke the tension, and both women laughed silently, a shared sound that felt intimate and comforting. In that moment, Ilara realized how rare it was to feel truly seen, truly understood without words. Seraphine then revealed something deeper. She signed of an old prophecy, one that spoke of a humble soul rising to lift the darkness from the palace. Ilara felt a shiver. Could it be her? She had never imagined her quiet life in the kitchens could lead to anything so monumental. And yet, in the presence of Seraphine, it felt possible. Hours passed, and the afternoon shadows grew long. Ilara's hands ached, but she continued. Each gesture became easier, more fluid, and the Queen Mother's eyes held approval and something more, a trust that had never been given lightly to anyone. Suddenly, the chamber door creaked. Ilara and Seraphine both turned toward the sound, alert and tense. Outside, someone whispered a single word, a warning perhaps, or a threat. Ilara could not understand it fully, but she felt the weight of danger pressing closer. Seraphine's eyes narrowed and she signed quickly, instructing Ilara to remain calm and silent. The unseen figure lingered for a moment, then left. Yet the sense of threat remained. Someone in the palace already knew about their secret lessons. Someone would try to interfere. Ilara's heart pounded as she turned back to Seraphine. The Queen Mother's hands moved slowly, deliberately, signing one word that resonated through Ilara's chest. Prepare. The word carried urgency, warning, and promise. Tomorrow would be another test. Perhaps more dangerous, but it was necessary. Ilara understood that the path she had stepped onto was not merely about learning gestures. It was about courage, trust in the quiet power that could change the kingdom. Before leaving, Seraphine reached out and touched Ilara's hand briefly, a small gesture but heavy with meaning. It was a sign of confidence, trust, and perhaps something more subtle, a recognition of Ilara's heart, fragile but brave. Ilara left the chamber with a new sense of purpose. Her steps felt lighter, yet every shadow in the hallways reminded her that eyes were watching. Allies and enemies alike were waiting for her to falter. But she felt ready, more ready than she had ever been. As night fell again, the palace seemed alive with secrets. Candles flickered in the corridors, casting shadows that moved like silent guardians or unseen threats. Ilara lay in her small room, hands resting nervously on her lap. Replaying the gestures, the expressions, the silent words of the day, she realized, with a mixture of fear and excitement, that her life would never be the same. The timid servant who had walked unnoticed through the palace corridors was now entwined with the fate of the Queen Mother, and perhaps the entire kingdom. And as she drifted toward sleep, a final thought flickered through her mind. Tomorrow, the true test begins. And someone in the shadows is already planning to stop her. Ilara's pulse quickened. She knew she could not hide any longer. The bond she was building with Seraphine was fragile, powerful, and dangerous. She had to be brave, and she had to be clever. But deep inside she felt a spark, an ember of courage and connection that nothing, not even the shadows of the palace, could extinguish. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning sun had barely touched the palace when Ilara arrived once more at the Chamber of Secrets. Her hands, now steadier from the previous lessons, carried a small bundle of scrolls and notes, reminders of the gestures and signs she had learned. Yet despite her growing skill, her heart still fluttered with nervous anticipation. Every day brought new challenges, and every moment with Seraphine felt both thrilling and frightening. The Queen Mother awaited her as always, seated among the cushions, her presence regal and calm. Her gray eyes, sharp yet soft, met Ilara's, and a small smile curved her lips. Today's lesson was different. Seraphine motioned for Ilara to sit closer, her hands moving with deliberate grace. She was no longer a distant teacher. Today, she was a partner, guiding Ilara through gestures that carried emotion as much as meaning. Ilara, Seraphine signed, her fingers tracing a slow, intricate pattern. Today you will learn not just the language of hands, but the language of hearts. Ilara's stomach tightened. Language of hearts. It sounded impossible, mysterious, almost magical. She had been learning to communicate thoughts, warnings, even instructions, but now she was to understand emotions, subtle desires, and hidden fears. They began with small exercises. Seraphine would sign a feeling, fear, joy, sorrow, and Ilara would respond, not with words but with her own hands, reflecting understanding. The air between them pulsed with quiet intensity. Every movement, every gesture seemed to linger in the space around them, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Hours passed in this silent, hypnotic dance. Ilara's confidence grew, and with it, a strange closeness to the Queen Mother. She noticed the way Seraphine's eyes softened when she succeeded, the slight tilt of her head, the subtle motion of her fingers that hinted at approval and, Ilara dared not name it, something warmer. A bond was forming, fragile yet undeniable, and it both thrilled and terrified her. But the palace outside was not idle. Rumors had begun to spread among the nobles. Whispers of the timid servant's unusual closeness to the Queen Mother reached ears that hungered for scandal. Some whispered that Ilara was manipulating Seraphine. Others feared she had discovered secrets no one should know. Shadows moved through the corridors, watchful and calculating, ready to strike at the first sign of weakness. During a pause in the lesson, a distant noise echoed from the hall. A soft, deliberate footstep. Both women froze. Ilara's heart pounded as she realized someone might be spying on them. Seraphine's fingers moved quickly, instructing her to stay calm. "Not all who watch are enemies," she signed. "But some are. Be careful. Trust only what you see with your heart." Ilara nodded, her hands trembling slightly, but she remained composed. The footsteps passed, and the chamber returned to its quiet intensity. Yet the sense of danger lingered like a shadow at the edge of her mind. The day grew longer, and their lessons deepened. Seraphine began teaching gestures that conveyed subtler meanings: trust, longing, regret, and even love. Ilara's hands moved carefully, capturing the nuances of emotion with increasing skill. She realized that communication through signs was more powerful than words. Gestures could speak truths that speech could not. A small, silent moment of intimacy passed between them. Seraphine's hand hovered near Ilara's, and for a heartbeat, their fingers almost touched. Ilara felt warmth surge through her, a mixture of fear, admiration, and something she could not name. Seraphine's eyes met hers, holding a question, a promise, and perhaps a hint of longing. Ilara blinked and looked away, her cheeks warming. She had never felt anything like this before, a connection that was deeper than friendship, yet restrained by the unspoken rules of the palace. She understood now that this was not just a lesson. It was a test of courage, trust, and the heart's own secret language. Their lesson was interrupted by a sudden commotion outside the chamber. Voices rose in anger, shouting accusations that Ilara could not fully hear. She felt Seraphine's hand tighten on hers briefly, a silent reassurance that she was safe. Then, without breaking the flow of their gestures, Seraphine signed a warning. A rival noble had challenged Ilara, intending to humiliate her before the court. Ilara's stomach twisted. She had never been confrontational, never sought attention, yet here she was at the center of a storm she had not provoked. But the Queen Mother's presence gave her courage. She realized that she could not shrink away. She had learned too much, grown too close, and now she would have to act. That evening, a ceremonial feast was held in the grand hall. Ilara's heart raced as she moved among the nobles, carrying trays with care. She felt every gaze upon her, every whisper that passed behind her back. She could sense jealousy, suspicion, and barely concealed malice. Yet she also felt a strange confidence. She had been trained, guided, and quietly supported by Seraphine. She would not falter. The rival noble approached her with a smug smile, intending to embarrass her in front of the court. But before he could speak, Seraphine's presence entered the hall with quiet authority. Her eyes locked onto the nobles, and she signed swiftly, subtly, conveying commands and warnings that only Ilara could understand. Ilara responded with grace, using her gestures to deflect the noble's attempt at mockery. She moved with calm precision, a silent dance of power that astonished the court. The noble's smug expression faltered, replaced by unease and frustration. Whispers rippled through the hall, some admiring, others jealous. Ilara felt a surge of pride and relief, but also a strange thrill. She was no longer just a timid servant. She was a part of something greater, a bond with Seraphine that had grown stronger with every gesture, every silent word, every moment of trust. As the feast continued, Ilara noticed that her connection with Seraphine had deepened. Their hands moved in subtle, shared language, communicating thoughts and emotions that no one else could understand. Every glance, every small motion, carried meaning. It was dangerous, thrilling, and intoxicating, yet danger was never far. As the night drew on, a shadowed figure watched from the far end of the hall. The rival noble had not given up. His eyes were filled with plotting, and it was clear he intended to strike again. Ilara's pulse quickened. She knew that her bond with Seraphine, as powerful and beautiful as it was, would also make her a target. The Queen Mother noticed the shadow, her eyes narrowing, and she signed quickly, alerting Ilara without drawing attention. Ilara nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. Danger was coming and they would have to face it together. After the feast, Ilara returned to the chamber, her mind buzzing with the events of the day. Seraphine awaited her, calm and poised as always, but her eyes held concern. She signed a single word that made Ilara's heart skip. Tomorrow. Tomorrow would bring another test more difficult than today. The shadows of the court were growing bolder, and someone was already plotting to strike at the bond between them. Ilara realized that she could no longer remain timid or hesitant. Courage, trust, and the subtle language of the heart would be her only weapons. Before she left, Seraphine reached out once more, her hand brushing against Ilara's in a fleeting, almost imperceptible touch. The gesture was heavy with meaning, reassurance, recognition, and perhaps even a hint of something deeper. Ilara felt a warmth that lingered long after she had stepped into the corridor, a quiet fire that gave her strength. As she lay in her small room that night, Ilara thought of the lessons, the gestures, and the bond she shared with Seraphine. She understood now that her life had changed irrevocably. She was no longer invisible, no longer timid. She was a part of something powerful, secret, and beautiful. And yet, as she drifted toward sleep, her thoughts returned to the shadowed figure at the feast. The danger had not passed, it had only grown. Tomorrow, the true test of courage, trust, and the silent power of gestures would begin. Ilara's heart beat with a mixture of fear, excitement, and longing. She knew that the path ahead would be difficult, perhaps even perilous. But she also knew that the bond she had formed with Seraphine was worth every risk. And deep within her, a spark of courage glowed, a promise that she would face whatever came, and she would not falter. Tomorrow, everything would be tested. And the palace, with its shadows and secrets, would reveal whether their bond was strong enough to withstand the storm that approached. The next morning, the palace was shrouded in mist. The corridors were quieter than usual, the usual bustle replaced by a tense stillness. Ilara walked briskly toward the chamber, her hands steady but her heart pounding. Today she would face the greatest challenge yet, the true test of her courage, skill, and connection with Seraphine. The chamber door opened before she reached it, revealing Seraphine waiting, her silver hair gleaming faintly in the soft light. The Queen Mother's eyes, sharp as ever, softened as they met Ilara's. Today their task was no longer just practice. Today they would attempt to lift the curse that had haunted the palace for decades. Seraphine signed swiftly, her fingers moving in a pattern more intricate than ever before. "The ritual begins," she said silently. "It will require trust, focus, and courage beyond what you have shown." Ilara nodded, swallowing the knot of fear in her chest. She had grown confident in her abilities, but this was different. The air in the chamber seemed to hum with unseen energy, and the walls themselves seemed to lean closer, listening, judging, awaiting the outcome. They began slowly, their hands weaving gestures together in perfect harmony. Each motion carried meaning, truth, intention, emotion. Ilara felt the rhythm of Seraphine's gestures like a heartbeat, guiding her, teaching her, and pushing her beyond her limits. The room filled with an almost tangible energy, a mix of anticipation, fear, and hope. Hours passed in this silent dance. Ilara felt every motion, every nuance, as if the Queen Mother's hands were extensions of her own. The bond between them had grown unbreakable, a silent trust that required no words. But outside the chamber, shadows moved. The rival noble who had attempted to humiliate Ilara had gathered a group of conspirators. They had discovered the secret of the Queen Mother's chamber and intended to stop the ritual before it could succeed. Inside, Ilara felt the presence of danger even without seeing it. Her hands moved faster, more deliberate, guided by instinct and the connection she shared with Seraphine. She realized that this moment demanded everything she had learned, not only gestures but courage, focus, and the strength of her heart. The ritual required them to align their intentions perfectly, their gestures flowing as one. Ilara could feel the power building in the room, a subtle hum that rose in pitch, vibrating through the floors and walls. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch with approval, their painted eyes glowing faintly as if acknowledging the unfolding miracle. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the corridor outside. The door rattled under forceful knocks and a shadow fell across the doorway. Ilara's pulse raced. The rival noble had come to stop them. Seraphine's eyes met Ilara's, and without speaking, she signed, Do not falter. Trust me. Ilara nodded, her hands moving with renewed determination. She felt the warmth of Seraphine's presence, the trust they had built over weeks of silent communication. Together they continued the ritual, weaving gestures that carried emotion, intention, and courage into the very air around them. The door rattled again, stronger this time. Outside, furious voices shouted demands and threats. Yet inside, Ilara and Seraphine moved as one, their gestures a language that no intruder could understand. It was a dance of power and connection, a silent symphony that transcended words. With each motion, the energy in the chamber grew. Shadows seemed to shrink, whispers of fear dissipated, and the oppressive weight that had haunted the palace for decades lifted, like a fog finally dissolving under sunlight. Ilara felt it in her bones. The curse was weakening, responding to the purity of their connection. The rival noble tried to burst into the chamber, but the air itself seemed to push him back. The gestures, the trust, the unity between Ilara and Seraphine created a protective barrier. Invisible yet powerful, the intruders faltered, unable to breach the magic woven by sincerity and courage. Finally, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the chamber, the last motion of the ritual completed. Ilara's hands hovered over Seraphine's and they signed the final word together. Freedom. A wave of warmth and light surged through the room, gentle yet overwhelming. The air seemed to sing, the oppressive weight of the curse lifting. The portraits on the walls shimmered, their eyes softening. Outside the chamber, the palace seemed to exhale, releasing years of fear, doubt, and shadow. Ilara sank to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Seraphine reached out, placing her hand over Ilara's. A simple gesture that carried more meaning than words could express. They had done it. The bond between them had not only lifted the curse but transformed the very essence of the palace. For a long moment they simply sat together, hands touching, hearts beating in quiet harmony. Ilara felt something she had never known before: complete acceptance, trust, and a profound connection that transcended fear and silence. Then a soft knock came at the door. Ilara looked up, her heart skipping a beat, but it was not a threat. A messenger, wide-eyed and hesitant, entered to report that the court had witnessed changes. Shadows of doubt dissolving, whispers of mistrust fading. The kingdom was awakening to a new era of hope and understanding. Ilara smiled faintly, glancing at Seraphine. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange they understood each other completely. They had faced danger, shadows, and doubt together, and emerged stronger, bound not only by trust but by something deeper, an unspoken, enduring bond. Seraphine signed slowly, a quiet command and a gentle invitation. Stay. Ilara's breath caught. She had always been timid, always thought her place was in the background. Yet here, in this moment, she realized that she belonged, not just beside the Queen Mother, but in the life she had helped transform. Outside the chamber, the palace continued to hum with change. Courtiers whispered, nobles bowed, and servants moved with a lightness they had not felt in decades. The silent darkness that had haunted the kingdom was gone, replaced by a subtle, quiet hope. Ilara and Seraphine rose together, hands still touching, their connection unbroken. As they walked through the corridors, it felt as if the walls themselves were acknowledging their courage. Shadows no longer lingered threateningly. Instead, they seemed to bow as if recognizing the strength of trust, sincerity, and heart. For the first time, Ilara felt truly seen, truly valued, and truly alive. And Seraphine, once isolated by her silence and her fears, now felt understood and accompanied in a way that filled her with both relief and joy. As they reached the balcony overlooking the palace gardens, the sun set in a blaze of gold and crimson. The air was still, warm with the promise of a new beginning. Ilara looked out at the horizon, feeling the weight of what they had accomplished, and the excitement of what lay ahead. Seraphine stood beside her, silent yet present, her hand brushing against Ilara's. No words were needed. The bond between them was clear, unbreakable, and radiant in its quiet intensity. And yet, even in this moment of triumph, Ilara knew that challenges would always exist. Shadows might return, and the court could still test them in unexpected ways. But for now, they had proven that courage, trust, and the language of hearts could overcome fear, suspicion, and even curses. Ilara took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around Seraphine's. Together, they had changed not only the palace but themselves. They had discovered strength, trust, and the power of connection beyond words. As night fell, the palace glimmered with candlelight, reflecting the promise of a future where fear no longer ruled. And in the quiet of the chamber they shared a final unspoken gesture, a silent vow to face whatever came together. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Ilara felt ready. She had discovered courage she never knew she possessed, and a bond that could withstand any shadow. And as she looked at Seraphine, she understood that this was only the beginning of a life filled with trust, love, and the silent magic of hearts that could speak louder than words. Outside, in the moonlit palace gardens, a soft breeze stirred, as if carrying whispers of congratulations from the past rulers whose eyes had watched over them. Ilara smiled, a quiet, contented smile, and knew in her heart that she had found her place, not just as a servant, but as a partner, a guardian of trust and a keeper of silent, enduring power, for in the language of hands, hearts, and courage, they had discovered a freedom that no shadow, no rival, and no curse could ever take away.